Hello everyone. This is the video for chapter 14, and so let's go ahead and get started. For this chapter you'll have a discussion board and you'll also have the chapter quiz. This chapter, go ahead and pull up your PowerPoint notes if you haven't, the ones that say My Notes chapter 14. That'll be the one I'll be going through. While you're getting that, I'm going to look through, make sure. Okay. So we're looking at early childhood special education. The first thing I want you to do though is go ahead and start out with a video. So go ahead and turn to the third slide that has Billy, and go ahead and click the button to learn more about Billy. Hopefully you paused my video. Okay. Chapter objectives, we're going to explain why early intervention is critical for young children with disabilities. We'll identify key differences between individualized family service plans, or IFSPs as I will call them, and individual education programs, or IEPs, that we have talked about in the past few chapters. You'll be able to list and describe the 5 purposes of each assessment in early childhood special education. You'll also be able to describe how a play activity or an everyday routine can become a specially designed learning opportunity for preschoolers with disabilities. And finally, you'll be able to list and briefly describe service delivery options for the young children and identify advantages and disadvantages of each type. The importance. Why is early intervention important? A comprehensive system of therapies, educational, nutritional, child care, and family supports, all designed to reduce the effects of disabilities or prevent the occurrence of learning and developmental problems later in life for children presumed to be at risk for such problems. So you'll need to make sure and look at that early intervention in your book, read up on that, and look at the education, nutritional, and family supports that it discusses. But you'll also realize that it said at the bottom, presumed to be at risk. So when we're looking at a YCD, a young child with developmental delays, you're not looking at whether they qualify in special education like we have in the past. There's a little bit differences here. We're looking at those children presumed to be at risk. I know I participated in one of our district's programs a few years back, and you'll invite all families in the area that are in your school district to come to screenings, and they will do different screenings. They will have the speech and language pathologist, you'll have special educators, you'll have a bunch of different people that are related to special education, and then they will do some screenings in different areas for these students. So let's go ahead and talk about, does early intervention work? There are several research components: the Skills and Die, the Milwaukee Project, the Abecedarian Project, and the Infant Health and Developmental Program. And it shows that comprehensive, experientially based early intervention enhances the development of young children who already exhibit delays, and helps children at risk of developmental delays by preventing those delays entirely or by minimizing their magnitude. So basically, we're going to work with these families, and you notice I said families. You will work more. That's why you have the IFSP that we'll talk about. But we're going to work with these families before it gets too difficult, and hopefully help them get up to speed with their peers before they enter kindergarten, or at least at an earlier stage. Outcomes: enhance the development of infants and toddlers with disabilities, reduce the educational cost to society by minimizing the need for special education and related services after infants and toddlers with disabilities reach school age, and maximize the potential for individuals with disabilities to live independently in society. So by doing these screenings and by getting these students involved early, then we're looking at giving them strategies and working with them so that they don't maybe need special education services when they enter school. Outcomes for early intervention a little bit more: enhance the capacity of families to meet the needs of their preschooler with disabilities. And again, we say the parents and family may be the most important. It is the most important. If you haven't figured that out by now in this class, you've missed a heck of a lot. Enhance the capacity of state and local agencies, And in 2012, approximately 2.8% of the population of infants and toddlers, or about 329,000, were served nationally under this. Early intervention talks about PL 99-457, mandated preschool services for children with disabilities ages 3 to 5, provided a voluntary incentive grant program for early intervention services to infants and toddlers. IDEA mandates early intervention services for any child under 3 years of age who has developmental delays or has a high probability of developmental delays. So there you go. It's in red. You better know that. States that receive IDEA funds for early intervention must serve all infants and toddlers with developmental delays or establish risk conditions. So see, now you've got developmental delays or established risk conditions are included in there too. And states may also serve infants and toddlers who are identified as at biological or environmental risk. Here are some other information. Developmental delays, significant delays or atypical patterns of development. Established risk conditions, they're diagnosed physical or medical conditions. Biological risk conditions might include pediatric histories or current biological conditions. And then environmental risk conditions might be extreme poverty, parental substance abuse, homelessness, abuse or neglect, and parental intellectual impairment associated with a higher probability of developmental delays. So those are some other ideas that you will want to know. Here's a slide. I want you to pause once we get done asking the question, and then we'll come back to the answer. Why is it so difficult to measure the impact of early intervention? So go ahead and pause, write down a few thoughts, and then we'll go to the next slide. Well, here's what I come up with the answer. Numerous methodological problems make it difficult to conduct early intervention research in a scientifically sound manner. Among the problems are selecting meaningful and reliable outcome measures, the wide disparity among children in the developmental effect of their disabilities, the tremendous variation across early intervention programs and curriculum focus, teaching strategies, length and intensity, and the ethical concerns of withholding early intervention from some children so they may form a control group for comparison purposes. So there are some ideas on why it's difficult to measure that. The IFSP, or the Individualized Family Service Plan. An IFSP is a plan that addresses the needs of child and family and is developed by a multidisciplinary team. An IFSP defines the family as being the recipient of early intervention services, which is there's where it's a little bit different than the IEP. The IEP identifies the child. Yes, they bring the family in, and the family is a participant. But here in the IFSP, the family is actually defined as the recipient. The IFSP must be evaluated once a year and reviewed in 6-month intervals. So here's another difference. IEPs just need to be done annually. Well, this one here, evaluated once a year and reviewed at 6-month intervals. Special education for preschoolers. Preschool children do not have to be identified under existing categories to receive services. You'll see that's in red. They do not have to have been identified. Local education agencies may elect to use a variety of service delivery options. In the IFSP, you have a statement of present levels of physical development, cognitive development, communication development, and adaptive development. You'll have the statement of families' resources, priorities, and concerns relative to enhancing the development of the toddler or infant with a disability. You'll also have a statement of measurable results or outcomes expected to be achieved for the toddler or infant in the family. And you'll have a statement of specific early intervention services based on peer-reviewed research. It'll also have a statement of natural environments in which early intervention services will appropriately be provided. It'll have projected dates for initiation of services and the anticipated length, duration, and frequency of service. And they'll have identification of the service coordinator. And lastly, steps to support the transition to preschool and other appropriate services. So you'll see, I want you to go through, I've outlined these in a numerical order so you can see a little bit more in detail the different elements of an IFSP. Here's another question. And then I want you to pause it and then write down what your thoughts are, and then we'll come back to it. How can we provide early intervention services for a child whose disability is not yet present? So go ahead and see what you think, your thoughts are on that. Write down a couple things and then come back. Okay. A child who has been identified as being at risk for developing a disability because of environmental or biological factors should receive preventive programming before any evidence of a disability exists. Parents and teachers do not have to wait until a delay in development occurs before they begin to interact with their children in ways that promote learning and development. Similarly, medical professionals do not need to wait and observe a health or biological condition before they can prescribe various precautionary or preventive procedures for the family to follow on behalf of the child. Intervention programs can never be started too early. Parents and professionals should pursue every reasonable precautionary and preventive measure that can be taken to ensure that the child does not develop a disability. So that gives you, again, these are children that do not necessarily have to have a diagnosis as of yet. Here are some more differences. IFSPs revolve around the family as a constant and most important factor in the child's life. They define the family as a recipient of the early intervention services rather than the child alone. It focuses on the natural environment in which the child and family live, and it includes interventions and services provided by a variety of health and human service agencies in addition to education. So remember that slide. Screening, identification, and assessment. Assessments of early childhood special education is conducted for at least 5 different services, individualized planning, monitoring progress, and measuring child outcomes. The screening tools, the APGAR scale, the newborn blood test screening, and developmental screening tests. The APGAR scale you will see again, so definitely look that up a little bit more. Determining eligibility for services. You need to look at this slide and look in the book and make sure you have these areas gone through. There are comprehensive assessment measure performance in 5 major areas. There's motor development, there's cognitive development, communication and language development, social and emotional development, and adaptive development. So you need to look at all those, get a better grasp on that than what I can do in this video. Provide planning and monitoring progress. Let me go ahead and do a little, here we go. Guided by accurate and sensitive progress, monitoring measures, individual growth and development indicators, and direct systematic observation are also part of that. I'd like for you to look at these next slide here and read about the 4 different purposes of assessment and evaluation in early childhood special education related to one another. So look at that. And then after you get done with that, there's another video, early intervention. I want you to go ahead and watch it. So you can pause this video and go back on and watch the early intervention part. Okay, we're going to talk now about curriculum and program goals. Support families in achieving their own goals. Promote maximum child independence and mastery. Promote development in all important domains. And build and support social competence. And facilitate the generalization of learned skills. So you'll be looking at those areas there. Also, prepare and assist children for typical life experiences with their families in school and in their communities. You're going to help those children and their families make smooth transitions and prevent or minimize the development of future problems or disabilities. There's also a discussion in the book about developmentally appropriate practice. It's a framework of principles and guidelines that outline practices that promotes young children's optimal learning and development. And there's core principles that it discusses. Knowledge must inform decision making. Goals must be challenging and achievable. And make sure and watch that, achievable, and watch it closely. Teaching must be intentional to be effective. And then selecting the IFSP or IEP goals and objectives. Goals and objectives should be evaluated according to the following quality indicators. And definitely look at the 3 that are in red, but also look at the 4th one. You have functionality, generality, instructional context, and measurability that you need to look at. Now let's look at the next slide, and we'll ask it, and then I'll ask you to pause the video and write down your thoughts, and then we'll come back with my answer. How can a play activity or everyday routine become a specially designed learning opportunity for a preschooler with disabilities? Think about that and pause my video and write down your thoughts. Okay. Well, play provides children with natural, repeated opportunities for learning. Teachers of young children with disabilities can arrange a child's play environment to promote skill mastery across several developmental domains. Teachers must also monitor the child's progress and make adjustments to the environment that will facilitate success of important skills. And I want you to look at it. I think you'll enjoy the next video. It's called The Importance of Play. And I wanted you to see what that's talking about. You know, you read it in the book, and now I want you to actually see it. So go ahead and pause my video and watch the video on importance of play. Okay. Well, instructional adaptations and modifications. We talked about that, about modifications and accommodations, but here we've got instructional adaptations and modifications. Teaching play, you're going to have play expansions. Peer-mediated interventions are possible. Embedded learning opportunities, preschool activity schedules, and a supportive physical environment. You need to look at those three and understand a little bit more about them before you go on to the quiz, but that'll help you have a better understanding of that. The service delivery options for early childhood special education include, it can be hospital-based programming for those who require special health care. Home-based programs built around the family involvement and support. There's center-based programs that provide early intervention in a special education setting outside of the home. And there's also combined home center programs that include center-based activities with home visitations. So read through those. You will need to have an understanding of the service delivery options and their differences. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but definitely take a look at them. But most important of all, parents and families are most important in making early intervention work. You need their support. You need their assistance. You're going to be providing them with ideas and activities to give their child to help them over whatever barriers or whatever risk factors may have come out of the screening process. And then the hope is with the parents' involvement, student involvement, and all of your team's involvement, that they may enable that student to be up to where their peers are by the time they enter into school. And if not, then they already have a good idea of what they're doing and what they're trying to do to help the child, so that if they are eventually tested them for special education, which is what would happen if they aren't on an IEP as of yet, they're on an IFSP, and it doesn't just automatically transfer. The student would be evaluated once they become age enough to do the IEP, and then they would work on an IEP with the student. But for right now, you're looking at IFSP. Parents are the most frequent and constant observer of the children's behavior. Who else than the parents to know better than anyone else what their children need and can help educators set realistic goals? Parents can monitor and report on their children's progress at home, and they are in it for the long haul, the parents are. So you need their support. And lastly, I'll let you click the standards and indicators for the young child with a developmental delay, and look at it to see the differences. And let's see if there's anything else that I wanted to do here. I'm going to go ahead and open up. Let's see, that was all of my notes there. And we go to the discussion board here. Sorry, computer's being a little bit slow. Okay, what I want you to do for this one on this part here is actually compared to differentiated instruction. So it's off the topic of the chapter a little bit, but go ahead and look at that. Give some ideas about what you're doing so far. There's 3 threads in there, and you need 1 for each thread, and then go back and give your peers some comments just like we do each week. And then take your quiz, and next week will be the final chapter. And then also, just a reminder, go ahead and fill out the, you should have received an email about evaluation for the class. It is very important to me as an instructor, as it will for you when you become a teacher, to hear what your students think about your class and how you could improve it. I've done a few things to try to improve this class for this year, and so I really need your input on the good, the bad, and the ugly. If there's something you don't like, tell me. I will not get to see who did what or who said what. All it gives me is a report that says what you suggested and what your ratings were, but it does not give me any indication of who sent it. Plus, it will actually be available to me after I have to have grades in. So there's no worries on your part, and not that I would anyway. I enjoy hearing what you say, good and bad. So anyway, thank you very much. You all have a great rest of your week.